The Bright Falls Altered World event, often just called the Bright Falls A.W.E, is one of the most famous and dangerous supernatural events in the connected universe of the games Alan Wake and Control. An Altered World event is a term used by the Federal Bureau of Control, a secret government group in the games. It describes a moment when forces from another world leak into our reality, changing the rules of nature. The events that took place in the small town of Bright Falls, Washington, shows exactly how terrifying and powerful these leaks can be. To understand the Bright Falls AWE, we have to look at its history, how the world was designed, and how the story finally reached its end. The center of the Bright Falls AWE is Cauldron Lake. In the game's lore, this lake is not just a body of water, but it is a doorway to another dimension called the Dark Place. The Dark Place is home to a dark, shadowy force known as the Dark Presence. This force has a unique and scary power that it can turn works of art into reality. However, it cannot create anything on its own. It needs an artist, like a writer or a poet, to shape the reality it wants to control. The main event began in the year 2010. A famous writer named Alan Wake travelled to Bright Falls with his wife Alice for a quiet holiday. Alan was suffering from severe writer's block, and the Dark Presence saw an opportunity. Taking the form of an old woman named Barbara Jagger, the Dark Force tricked the couple into staying at a cabin on an island in the lake. It then pulled Alice into the water. To save his wife, Alan was forced to write a horror story called Departure. Because of the lake's power, the words fucking hell, I've got Alan Wake on the mind. The words Alan wrote started to come true in the real world. The Dark Presence used the story to take over the townspeople, turning them to shadow monsters known as the Taken. Alan had to fight his way through the town, using light to burn away the shadows before he could hurt the monsters. According to in-game documents found in the game Control, this was not the first time the lake had acted up. In the 70s, a poet named Thomas Zane also tried to use the lake's power to bring back his lost love, which caused a massive disaster. A local doctor named Emil Hartman, I don't know how to pronounce that, forgive me, also spent years trying to study and control the lake by trapping artists in his clinic. The history of the town is built on this cycle of artists being used by the dark water. The design of the Bright Falls AWE is deeply rooted in classic American horror and mystery. When you look at the town of Bright Falls, it is impossible not to think of the famous TV show Twin Peaks. Both feature a quiet, foggy town in the Pacific Northwest surrounded by deep forests, weird locals, and a dark supernatural secret hiding just out of sight. The character of Alan Wake is clearly inspired by real-life horror writers like Stephen King. In fact, the game even starts with a quote from King about nightmares. The idea of a writer whose stories come to life is a classic horror theme, but the game takes it further by making it a real physical threat. Even Cauldron Lake has a real-world twin. It is very similar to Crater Lake in Oregon, and like Cauldron Lake, it is a deep, dark body of water formed inside the mouth of an old volcano. Native American legends in the real world say that Crater Lake is a holy and dangerous place, a battleground between spirits of the sky and the underworld. This perfectly matches the in-game history of Cauldron Lake, where the forces of light and dark are constantly fighting. The design of the game itself perfectly matches the story, with the entire experience built around the contrast between light and dark. Save zones are always under bright streetlights, and your main weapon is a simple flashlight. Can't tell if I said flashlight or flashlight. I want to just clear up. Flashlight, torch if you're English, the proper way of saying it. The developers designed the world so that the darkness was heavy and thick, almost like a living thing, which makes the story of the Dark Presence feel incredibly real. The events of 2010 didn't go unnoticed, with the Federal Bureau of Control, the group responsible for tracking these strange events, had been watching Bright Falls for a long time. In the game Control, we find files showing that the town's former police sheriff, Frank Breaker, was secretly an agent for the Bureau. When the 2010 A.W.E happened, the Bureau moved in and they set up a secret monitoring station near the lake to watch the doorway to the Dark Place. They also arrested Dr. Hartman, and the Bureau tried to study him, but things went terribly wrong. The darkness from the lake was still inside him, and when a different alien force invaded the headquarters, it mixed with the darkness inside Hartman, turning him into a massive monster. For a long time, the story of the Bright Falls AWE was a tragic one. At the end of the 2010 event, Alan managed to save his wife, Alice. He used a magical object called a clicker, a light switch from his childhood, to balance the story he wrote. Alice was pulled out of the lake, but Alan had to take her place, and he was trapped in there for 13 years. But the event did not end there. While trapped, Alan kept writing, trying to find a perfect story that would let him escape without letting the dark presence loose on the world. He reached out across dimensions and even wrote clues that helped Jesse Faden, the hero of the game Control, defeat the monster that Hartman had begun. The true ending to the Bright Falls A.W.E finally unfolded in 2023. During the events of Alan Wake 2, the Dark Presence tried to escape again by creating a dark copy of Alan called Mr. Scratch. This caused a new wave of horror in Bright Falls, twisting the town into a nightmare. An FBI agent named Sega Anderson arrived to investigate the murders caused by this new event. Sega and Alan ended up working together across the two different dimensions, with the story revealed that Alan had been stuck in a loop, repeating his mistakes over and over. But with Sega's help, he realised it was not a circle but a spiral. He'd been slowly moving upward the entire time. In the final moments of the story, Alan and Sega work together to rewrite the ending of the nightmare. Alan accepts the dark part of himself instead of just fighting them, and Alice, who had secretly gone back to the dark place to help him, guides him to the final truth. Alan is shot with a bullet made of pure light which destroys the dark copy of himself inside his mind, and he wakes up with a clear mind, declaring that he is finally the master of the two worlds. The Bright Falls A.W.E is a masterpiece of storytelling, as it takes simple fears, the dark, losing your mind, and the scary power of art, and turns them into a deep, rich history. It started as a simple trip to a cabin in the woods and ended 13 years later as a massive world-spanning story about facing your own shadow and stepping back into the light.